Folks, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show, and joined again by Leland Sklar, incredible bass player, guy who was just an inspiration, more as a human being even than a bass player, which is actually says quite a bit. So, welcome back, man.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back.
You know, Lee,
I missed you. I missed you.
We'll be together again. I say that I talk about my show with the 4 L's. So I wanted to go through each one of the L's and have you tell a story about what you consider in your career, if you can tell a story about the value that I give you. The first one L is leadership. Tell me about what you consider to be real leadership. I guess across the board in your entire life, whether you're taking video of people dancing in the street or playing bass on Spectrum. I mean, what is leadership to Lee Sklar?
I think leadership, off the top of my head, I would call it involvement. You're fortunate enough to find yourself in situations every day, be it in your just normal routine in music and recording on tour, and I love being involved and trying to help motivate whatever I'm doing along with kind of like a cheerleader type mentality, just to keep the ball rolling and keep the energy level up and all that. So certainly in the studio, I've always kind of prided myself in my involvement. I jump right into the thick of everything and always throw out suggestions and, goof around with everybody, just trying to keep the energy level high.
But that's why you're that's awesome. I mean, that to me, that's like it's on top of the fact that you can play the bass, right? I mean, I guess it's cool because, I don't know, I think a lot of people are pretty uptight in the studio sometimes. So it's kind of...
They can be.
Yeah.
They can be. But the main thing is, we're fortunate enough in life, basically to have a life, and why not, relish it and kind of enjoy it to the max. And when I'm in the studio, especially, or on tour, things can drop into a funk at certain points. It really, to me, it behooves me to get it out of that morass that it might get into, and just keep everybody focused on the end result. And I know other guys that do the same thing, but I also know other guys that are wallpaper. You go in the studio, you would never even know the cat's there other than his playing. I mean, they contribute nothing emotionally to the session other than a part. And at times you just kind of go, Jesus, don't you want to step up to the plate once in a while and take a swing yourself?
Yeah, or it's like in the act of the thing is that did you find people? Do you cite someone early in your career that you consider to be a good leader?
I really can't. Because when I started, this was all kind of, for all of us, so new that we really didn't have any peers that we could look towards. Because when I first started going in the studio, within 6 months of the first time I ever really went in the studio, I was suddenly thrust into being one of the A-list guys. And so it wasn't like I was on dates with other... I mean, certainly as things evolved and I would go in the studio and I would be in with somebody like Larry Knechtel or Hal Blaine or Tommy Tedesco, or, a lot of the old Wrecking Crew guys when I started working with them. I certainly looked towards them because they had been doing it for so long and were so successful at it. But all those guys kind of had that same energy, and it was fun for me. I just kind of jumped into the middle of it, wasn't really emulating anybody. But it's just the atmosphere was so comfortable with all those guys that I just sort of assimilated right into the scene. It wasn't like I was sitting as a neophyte and scrutinizing everybody.
No. I mean, like, I just look at these titans. You know, the other thing that's blowing me away. So, can you tell me how you first? Did you like hang out with Gene Clark and or Clarence White or these guys? Did you play with them live, or was the first time you met them in the studio? Because I'm sort of looking.
It was only in the studio.
Only in the studio. How?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working the first time, well, when I was working with Clarence, I was working with Clarence when he got killed.
That day that the guy ran him over.
We were in, I think, for about a week.
Wow.
In the studio, and we came in, you know, one day, and they said Clarence was killed last night by a drunk driver. He was changing a tire on his car, and a guy ran into him. I mean, it was, and the guy was such a beautiful person and musician. It was unbelievable. That's happened to me several times. I was working with Percy Faith, doing a Percy Faith and his orchestra album, and Percy died in the middle of the project. It's weird when that happens. And Gene, other than what was that album? The other. I just was look. I said I'm blanking.
You know, but Sklar. The other thing is like that album. All these bluegrass. I guess whatever, if you want to label the music. I mean, all these albums you played on are really high dollar albums. That Gene Clark album is.
It's really the definitive album.
Holy cow!
His career,
unbelievable.
And certainly in that genre. He was remarkable. I mean, he was great to work with, and we had a great time making that record. He was one of those special people that comes along, and I was, you know, still at that point, I found myself, you know, sitting in the studio, and I was such a Byrds fan, and when I got to like work with any of these guys, you kind of sit there and you go, holy crap! I mean, that's the cat that I used to go see at the Hullabaloo, or you know,
right?
Like, yeah, I'm really still an Uber fan, and I do pinch myself when I end up with people that I've had such respect for. I mean, it's really, to me, that's one of the oddest parts of my whole career, because in my heart of hearts and in my mind, I'm still just sort of this dorky guy from the San Fernando Valley that, you know, you kind of go, why would he know me? And I'll suddenly find myself in a situation, and like Clapton's there or somebody, and they come up and they go, hey, Lee, how you doing?
You're right.
and I go, why in the fuck does this guy know who I am?
Or, it's you know, man.
Into Robert Plant, you know.
I love it.
You know, it's like, it's just weird. It's just a very strange situation, because
but the fact that we can sit here and you can acknowledge that is just powerful, because, you know, that's the magic. There are other cats. Did you ever play with Alan Schwartzberg at all, the drummer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Alan, I mean, what a sweet man. Like, you know, I did an interview with him, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and you know, he told the story. He goes, some guys just don't get it, and he told the story. He was playing at the half note, it was Jake Hanna, Ron Carter, and Jim Hall trio, and
wow.
You know, and Jake Hanna couldn't make the gig, and so Schwartzberg got the nod, and this was like the first time he was going to be, you know, playing with Ron Carter. It was like, you know, like you said, he talking to Robert Plant. It's like, why does this guy know? This is incredible, and he's like. He looks at Ron Carter before the set starts, and he's like, yo, man, I'm really jazzed up to play with you, man. It's just such an honor, you know, and Ron's like, yeah, fuck, what a great, fucking, let's play the show. I don't give a shit. And it's like, you missed the boat, man. You missed it. You know, I'm not. It's about being classy and staying within yourself, staying humble, knowing the music. I'm not. Maybe he is a different cat, but I mean, I just think that some people didn't get the memo. Guys like Schwartzberg and yourself, to acknowledge that kind of humanity. That's what.
I'll tell you who's great at that is Phil Collins. Phil is one of these guys. He carries a camera around with him, and there's nothing that excites him more than having his picture taken with a celebrity that he digs. Another musician. I remember they were doing Tommy at the Universal Amphitheater years ago, and I went over there, and Phil was involved in it. And he was like a kid in a candy store running up to everybody asking if he could have his picture taken with them. And they're all shitting in their pants going, that's Phil Collins. And yet he's like this kind of really humble little, like a kid, going, oh man, can I have my picture taken with you kind of thing. It's, to me, that's really one of, I don't sit in awe of somebody, but I really admire people who have followed a dream and they're successful at it. And it really, I'm tickled to death when I walk into a situation, and there's just certain people that you find yourself in these situations, and you just. When first time I worked with Andy Griffith, I thought I was going to faint. Here's this guy I know every episode of the Andy Griffith show, and suddenly I'm getting phone calls from him going, "Hey Lee, how you doing? Andy here."
Oh, and yeah, tripped out.
Holy crap!
Wow.
Wow. Freak. And there's been so many of those, especially when I got to work with the old guard, like when I'd work with Andy Williams and Roger Williams and these guys, or when I'm around Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and Christofferson and all these guys, and you just these guys are like really titans of their art, and the fact that they acknowledge I exist to me is like really freaks me out.
But isn't that what makes them? That's why they're so coveted, because they just supersede it all, and they. Again, I go back to this idea where you said it in one of the interviews, was just is the idea that the stars of the day, Taylor and. Especially when you got into, with the Gorilla album and In the Pocket, those cats were doing really well by those standards. In my mind, we got into this berserko capitalism mode where now, the money is just, it's just sort of, you don't get caught up. I don't get caught up in it, but the fact is, what was relative then is not relative now. But they wanted to share. They wanted to share the wealth with a brotherhood. I talked to. I just talked to Keltner yesterday, and he's like, Shelly Manne used to grab him by the arm and be like, hey, man, he's like, you playing jazz? And Keltner's like, yeah. Of course he was not. But he's like, yeah, everybody was looking out for each other.
Exactly.
Which doesn't really,
that brotherhood doesn't. It exists to an extent, but it's far diminished from those old days when everybody was hanging out with everybody else at sessions, and it's like I work with Keltner all the time, and we talk on the phone all the time, and I just Greg Bissonette just called me today, and we were talking for a while just about family and life and everything, and a project that's coming up that we're trying to align together because we love playing together. It's different now than it was. The whole kind of blueprint that was developed is gone, and a lot of that went with the advent of kind of just the corporate music business taking over from this more of a guerrilla industry that it was for so long.
Can you explain the word guerrilla? Can you explain what that means?
Guerrilla, it's certainly not the James Taylor album.
No. You're talking, I know.
When we were, getting started at this, there was really kind of a pretty vague, it was the rule book was more of like a Cliff Notes version of it. It's like you were kind of writing your script on a daily basis, the way we processed songs, the way we recorded them, the way we related to artists, and those things. So it was really kind of like this, like a pickup game of basketball. You just kind of grab the guys and you go out there and you see what happens. Where nowadays it's so much more formulated, and there's so much decisions are being made by people that aren't necessarily musical, that have gotten into positions of power, or you're working on projects that the guy who's like bankrolling it maybe made his money in real estate, but he's always had a Jones.
Exactly.
But then rather than just enjoying the process, they start to get involved in it, and you're going, oh, really?
I think it's delusion, and why they can't understand that they have a gift, they've been gifted in some area that made them a very lucrative career, for them to have the ego to walk in and start to meddle and be oblivious to the fact that not everybody can do the same thing, that not everybody can do everything. And I think my question is, was there a point? I guess I heard it phrased. Ben Sidran, I think, said it best about this time period that we're talking about when the rules were sort of being made up on the fly. It was just that, the businessmen in general were interested in making money. As long as they made money, they were content to leave the producers and the arrangers and the artists alone. But I also believe that there must have been cats that were businessmen but also loved the music. They weren't some guy that was putting a bunch of Quicken Loans in the downtown Detroit with neon lights on them.
Well, also in the earlier days of this, there really was all label oriented, and the guys that ran the labels when I'd be in the studio with Ahmet Erdogan and Joe Smith and Herb Alpert and all these guys. These guys love music and were passionate about music, and they totally understand. They understood that while running labels, you could be passionate about the music, and one of the ancillary parts of that would be you make money. Rather than having money be the motivation for it all, they were looking to make art and knew that during the course of making art, they would also make money. But a lot of those people left because those guys were musicians at heart.
They were.
But when you start ending up with accountants and lawyers making those calls, it's a different animal completely.
Yeah, and it tore away at the fabric of I think Taj Mahal called them the trolls. The trolls started to take over, and it tore away at that. I think that was the other thing. You guys were. I can see it in the pictures. When I really honed in on like this incredible time of this pocket of when you first joined, or early in your career with James when you guys were really cooking and I just you can see how in the moment everything was. It was. It had such a different tempo. It was relaxed, and when the stuff got and things took longer to procure, so therefore everyone wanted to commit themselves to a really fine piece of work because it was going to take so freaking long.
Well, also everybody had such a point of pride in what they were doing.
Yeah.
I always look at this as when your phone rings, you have two options. You can say yes or no. And if you say yes, it comes with obligation, and you really need to step up to the plate if you say yes, because I think we talked about this in one of the other interviews. I'll go do a session for somebody. I have a different session the next day. The session I did for the guy that day, though, that might be his only shot at the business. And if this isn't successful, he's out and has to look for a new life. Where I'm going on to work on something else and then something else the following day. And so I feel a sense of obligation that if I say yes and I show up, I'm going to do the best job I possibly can and be as engaged and involved as I possibly can. So when I walk out the door, this guy's got the best thing going that he can possibly come up with.
That's
hopefully
awesome.
Hopefully out of that, then maybe he'll get more work, which gives me more work, and it really is a self-perpetuating piece of machinery.
Right, and the difference was that when records were the dominant listening medium in this country, you had this, you had liner notes, you had a picture. You didn't have you certainly didn't have the internet, but you didn't also have. Again, I go back to this thing where people say, you can make your own. Everyone can make their own record now, and I just and I realize that budgets are huge. You can't have a sixth, you can't have a sextet with any additional percussion anymore because it's too expensive to have a cat like a timbale.
Or you're calling them favors all the time.
It's just no timbaleros and conga, and it's like it's just gotten chipped away and chiseled away, and it's gotten a lot more streamlined. And as a result, I talked to the skipper Henry Franklin today. He just got back. He just got back from China. He was there for I think he was there for 186 days, and I think he gigged 182 days.
Wow!
A trio with these guys, Bill Hyde and on an organ or his piano. It was a trio, and he goes, it was weird. He goes, I was staring out, and I just was looking at a lot of people staring at cell phones.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's like that, like even when he was with Gene Harris, and like they would play in front of 3 people and they'd just be smiling ear to ear. At least there'd be an engagement. I feel like the consciousness that you guys used to share with the audience at the Berkeley Community Theater with JT, and like that visceral connection. Even though I didn't even experience that, now at this point it's become like younger generations, younger than me, have just deemed that music is more background. It's not meant to be a connective thing.
Also, so many people, their listening experience is on their phone. It's like people watching movies on their phone. No, you need to go into a big old theater that has a huge sound system and have the spectacle of the experience. And to be sitting at home listening to music on some little crappy, iPod or something like that with earbuds, as compared to having a powerful amp, your turntable, your speakers, and being immersed in the music.
Exactly.
A whole other experience. And I was just working a while back over at Ocean Way, and Alan Sides brought me into one of the rooms, and he said, "Man, dig this," and it was his new speaker system in there. And he cranked up some project that they had been working on, and I just sat there, and I was just screaming. It was just so stunning. It was so visceral. You could just feel it, coming right up through your diaphragm. And I'm thinking, so many people are just walking around with this crappy little earbud stuck in their head, and that's their entire musical vocabulary at this point. And it's to me, it's just sad. They've lost so much in the translation. But I think we talked about this once before. The thing I really miss is I miss LPs. Now, I'm not going to argue, analog versus digital, because it's a moot point. If I do projects where we get to plug into a 16 or a 24 track machine and actually record rhythm section to analog, it's heavenly. I know a lot of great engineers.
Yeah, man, that's I'm such a purist
with digital at this point, but I miss LPs from the standpoint of it being such a tactile experience.
Absolutely.
Of pulling that record, pulling the album jacket out, and then you slide that record out of that, and sometimes the sleeve would have all kinds of writing on that, or it would have inserts in it. The time we spent sitting in mastering rooms, deciding the amount of time between tracks, how you programmed a record, from how did you want the end of side A to end emotionally, and then how did you want side B to start? And there was so much process that went into it, where when it became a digital experience, suddenly people weren't really that concerned about having a conceptual album, from top to bottom, hitting random and only maybe playing a couple of tracks that they liked, and suddenly it diminished the entire experience of a full album. And I find myself so many times now, people say, "Oh, we're going to go in the studio," and all they're doing is going and cutting maybe 2 sides. They're going to do like an EP or something like that,
right?
As compared to having a vision to make an entire record. And,
I think that you hit it on the head, though. I think that let's face it. A lot of cats that you've played with a lot really had vision. I think you just hit that word.
Yeah.
I think the word vision, able to articulate the way people are feeling authentically at a certain time, being able to be sensitive enough to and then having accompanists who are sensitive enough to be a team like that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just...
There was so many like that. When I sit and especially during the singer-songwriter period, with the James and Jackson Brown, and listening to people like Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell and Judy Collins and all the people from that genre, really, Crosby, Stills and Nash, or Crosby and Nash, or all those guys, when they whatever kind of layout they would have. But this vision of projects that they really didn't go in the studio until they had this entire vision planned out. It would be modified certainly during the course of making the album, but for the most part, they really kind of saw this as a complete package, and it was an emotional package, a little journey that you went on with them, and you can't have that experience out of one song or two songs. Plus, one of the things that's sorely missing in this world now is artist development, which was a major part of those early days, because there were labels that would sit with somebody like Bonnie Raitt. I mean, I don't know how many albums she had before Nick of Time, but, you know, somebody at the label said, no, this girl is a valuable artist, and we're going to keep doing albums with her until it finally hits. And then when it hits, then her old catalog starts selling, and they make all their money back. But they were willing to speculate and invest in artists, where nowadays, man, you cut one side and it doesn't do great. You're history. Nobody wants you. They're just moving on to the next person. It's like open up another can of artists.
No, but you know what? It is that sort of business model has pervaded all of society. I mean, it's not just music. I mean, I just interviewed Cavallari this morning, Felix Cavallari, and he, he's just like, dude, this is a really bad freaking business. Like, I mean, it's not, but to find the good people inside of it, but you can, listen, Sklar, first of all, you're out getting bougainvillea trees. I'm taking my younger daughter to the vinyl is very much alive, especially in small towns. You can go now. I mean, we don't have a traditional record store. We have a bookstore, so, a lot of people are dumping their collections in thrift stores. And, I mean, I can walk out of there, if somebody dumps an old Philly Groove collective from, like, the late 50s, I'm walking out of there, with $20. You're picking up, like 60 records, and then, but, I mean, it requires the unit, the receiver, the speakers, and then you put that vinyl on. I mean, when I found the First Section album, self-titled, I was in San Diego, and I pulled that out of the bottom of a shelf somewhere. I said, and you know what? It's a white label promo, and the pressing says something about the legend of Cleopatra. So they put the wrong pressing on your album. It's so crazy, Sklar. I gotta send you this, man.
That's fantastic.
And you know what? It's Smilin' Eddie into the Bolero song on the Cleopatra side, and it just that's my favorite. And you put that needle on, and it's worn down, but you can hear there's so much space in the music. And I look at the rushing, there's a frenetic quality. Not everybody contributes to it, but there's a frenetic quality that has sped us up a little bit, and you can hear that in the music too. There's no space. I just would love to hear you in a session, or see you work with cats that are rushing and trying to slow them down. I think that would be very powerful.
That's why I carry a baseball bat with me. Smack the crap out of them. One well placed, little pop.
Right, they're out. They're done.
Backbeat.
They're done.
Slow.
Yeah. So tell me about this guy. How you played on Willis Allen Ramsey?
I think the album we did with him was one of his only records.
It was, Sklar, and it's an incredible album, man. You are playing. He plays a little bit of bass on it, but you're playing great, and it's called. And I can't remember, but it was kind of, was he like Leon? Was he with Leon Russell? Who was Willis? He was an enigma to me.
Yeah, I know that Lyle Lovett is a huge fan of him. He's talked about him many times. But it was so long ago. I mean, I think we did that album back in the early '80s.
No, 72, 71.
Really, it was that old?
71, dude. There's a track with you and Ernie Watts on it.
Oh, how amazing!
Dude,
I haven't seen it or heard it since then.
There's, I got 2 copies of it, so I'll send one to you. It is. What's interesting is that he even plays some amazing bass on it too. Going back to the Clarence White stuff though. What's interesting to me is that you never, like Old and in the Way with Vassar and Jerry and John Conn and those guys. Colin would play the upright bass. So I'm like, Sklar, you never played upright with those bluegrass guys, like Herb Peterson or anything? It was always electric?
Yeah, they always just said, just bring your old bass along, and I would just kind of, I would tend to either do a little bit of, stick some foam in it or something like that, just to deaden it up and give it more of a little flat wound kind of sound.
Yeah, right. So you would put a little bit of foam in there or something?
Yeah, I've got a few tricks that I do, just to give as much variety to a single instrument as I possibly can. So I carry different blocks of foam rubber with me. That I remember Bob Babbitt once talked about that, where he said, "Look at you just buy a cheap kitchen sponge and just cut it into little pieces." And what he would tend to do is, rather than shoving foam underneath between the string and the bridge or the body, he would have these little blocks, and he would put one block between the G and the D string, and then another block between the A and the E string. And suddenly, I do that all the time now. I just did a project the other day with Steve Tyrell, where he's doing an album that's a tribute to the songs of the Brill Building. And
Wow.
One of the songs we did, I just thought, it'll sound better, more of that kind of dead bass sound. And I did that, and it just, that way my bass goes from, I always play with stainless round wounds, and all of a sudden it sounded like I had old labella flat wounds on it, just putting this little bit of foam in it. You just do a few little tricks here and there, just tweak it a little bit, and it's fun. It's just fun to goof around. And plus, when you do that, and on stuff where I want to use an octave divider when I'm playing, I always put foam in, because the octave dividers, especially like the Boss OC2, tend to glitch a lot with overtones, and as soon as you put the foam in, it makes it far more fundamental, and you don't get the glitching that happens.
Right.
So, just little tricks and stuff like that.
Was bluegrass like just something that you picked up real naturally? I mean, it's not easy to play. It is, and you.
I've never really thought about it.
I know. I knew you'd say that. What an annoying answer that is.
Well, it's one of those things that, to me, it's music.
I know.
It's just like when I get called to do Latin projects, and I always I always end up putting kind of my own spin on Latin stuff, because I end up doing quite a bit. I mean, I just finished a Brazilian project. I have another Brazilian project coming up. I've worked a lot with bands out of Peru and Central America, and a lot from Mexico. And I just kind of put my own spin on it and let the music just kind of tell me what it needs, especially if I'm working with a drummer who really gets that stuff. Then I can kind of think around with it, and because when I do it, it doesn't sound like a real traditional Latin bassist. But I've listened to enough of that stuff where I can allude to it, but maintain like my own personality within it. But I've done that with all music. I mean, be it bluegrass or country or R&B or whatever. I always try to maintain my own identity through the whole thing. I was going to say, yeah, and you worked with Kinky Friedman too. You played on that They Ain't Making Jews Like Jesus Anymore? Yeah.
Oh my God, I love
Kinky's
it.
great. Kinky's just great.
Oh my.
That's a really good author.
I want to get him on the program. That guy's
He'd be fabulous. There's a bunch of guys that would be fantastic. One of my favorite people that you should talk to is Van Dyke Parks.
Wow, I would love
Van
it.
Dyke is one of when I work with Van Dyke, I feel like Nipper, the RCA dog, with his master's voice. I don't even care if we're playing music. Just tell stories, because his stories are so amazing.
Oh.
It's kind of like listening to Horton Foote talk. He's got this beautiful little southern drawl when he talks, and his command of the language makes Spiro Agnew kind of look like a dolt.
I crave that stuff, and what I like is that I do feel like we a lot of younger generations are craving. They want authenticity. They don't know it. That they don't know it yet, but they need those stories, and that's really. Yeah. I just want to be a conduit to that, because I've had guys. I mean, some of the stories are just magical, and I look at you and I say, the business is hard, but it's really not that hard when you're so busy. I mean, you're still so busy, man. You know, like there are cats that have slowed down on their own accord, you know, but you still are playing.
I'm hungry.
Right. Well, I mean, because okay. So you did leadership. Tell me about Tell me about love. What does love mean to Leland Sklar?
I mean, there's so many aspects. I think where it really comes down to is opening your heart and being accessible and vulnerable, so that you can, you know, run with all the emotions. But really, I don't look at love necessarily as an intellectual thing. It's a far more visceral,
right,
gut level.
Can you give an example from your career where you opened yourself up to total vulnerability?
Let me think. This is really.
No, I mean, listen. If we can, I like getting you. I like to see Sklar squirm a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Here, let me move. I want to move on to one. Let me move on to another one. It's called lineage, and you could also insert legacy. And what you just said is you're hungry. Why is Leland Sklar still hungry after all these years? It's not because you feel like you need to prove yourself. There's a lot of people that are insecure like that. Why are you still hungry?
I think I'm still hungry because I look at this entire journey that I've been on as an adventure, and I think there's more adventures to be had. I don't think that. I mean, that's one of the greatest blessings about this business for me is the fact that as repetitive as a certain aspect of it is in terms of what I do, every day it's different. Every day I'm meeting new people and having new experiences, and that's what keeps me hungry because I know tomorrow is going to be a new adventure. The other day, I've done a lot of work over the years with an arranger composer named Steve Dorff, and he called me and he said, "Look, I got this kid that I'm working with, and I'd love for you to come in. He's got this song, and it just could use what you do on it." And it's this young kid. I think he just turned 21, named Dylan Chambers. And he said, "You got to see the guy play rather than just hear him play." And he sent me a little video of this kid sitting in his living room. His guitar playing is so unique. It's such a really unique style. Strong, really neat voice, and really a cool song that he had. So I went over and it had a great afternoon figuring out bass parts for this song because his playing was as complete and comprehensive as James Taylor's style of playing. And so I had to kind of suss out how am I going to fit into this to justify the drive over. And we had a ball. I mean, it was really great, and I hope I get to do more with this guy. But to me, that's the whole thing. Is the
exactly.
day before,
yeah.
I didn't know this kid existed, and all of a sudden, you know, I got to play on something that I think is really, really cool. Another project I worked on that is really it's fabulous, and it came out of the blue. Matt Rawlings called me because I've done tons of work with Matt over the years. He's still one of the finest keyboard players I've ever known. And he called me and he said, "Look, I'm doing this project," and the girl, the artist, said she doesn't want to do it if it's not you doing it. She was like this fan. And when I met her, we started talking, and she's like, I don't know, 26 years old. And there was a movie out many, many years ago called Curly Sue. And this girl was the star of that movie when she was, I don't know, like 10 years old or something. I think she won Star Search when she was like 8. And we got in the studio, and she opened her mouth and sings so great. And she has a guy that she's been writing with, and coolest tunes. It was just one of these projects where you walk away just with a grin on your face going, "Man, I love doing this." And I look for that as much as possible. So that keeps me really hungry and kind of thinking, what's tomorrow going to be? Who am I going to meet? And tomorrow will be a big turd, and you might go in there and you just go, oh, this sort of sucks.
Right. No, but I mean, yeah, go ahead.
You're going to do the best you can, but still, there's certain stuff you do, and you just kind of go, no, I don't know why they're even wasting their time doing this, but, that's their call, not mine.
What was the most eclectic kind of show? Like, if you went on tour with Taylor in the early '70s, did you ever wind up with? I remember the classic example, the Isle of Wight show, where you have Tiny Tim and Miles Davis's quintet follows him.
Oh yeah, that kind of stuff.
Right? Like the idea of because I gotta figure, I'm like, maybe they had like some big jam one time, and Sklar wound up playing with some jazz group. I'm just curious about the weirdest to get the Bill Graham effect kind of thing.
Not so many weird things like that. I'll tell you one of the greatest one of those things I ever experienced though was every year they do a thing that's the Nebworth Festival, and it's at the Nebworth estate outside of London, and it's for like their music cares kind of a thing, for music education. So we put together, I mean, and it's huge. I don't know, there's 500,000 people or something show up for the gig. It's massive. But we showed up, and what we had done was it was with Phil Collins, so we put Genesis together with Phil's band. So it was Phil's whole band plus Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford.
Oh my!
But on the same bill, it was Page and Plant, Pink Floyd, Elton, McCartney, and Wings. Oh God! I mean, it's like everybody you've ever thought of was on this bill. It was like a full day festival, and just walking around and talking to people. And I remember that was the first time I ever met McCartney. And we were hanging out, and it was just weird because I saw him, and he was sitting with Linda, and this was back in 1990. And I thought, man, I got to talk to this guy. I got to go say hi, say something.
Right.
I felt like Ralph Cramden. I was just going to kind of go, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "Oh man, Lee Sklar, I've always wanted to meet you."
Oh man.
Freaked me out, but so we were hanging out and talking.
That's classic.
It was great. But when his set finished with Wings, I went over and I was talking to him. I said, the thing that flips me out is I said the last time I heard some of these songs, I said I was an usher at the Hollywood Bowl when you guys played there.
Wow, it
was like this entire full circle. It went flying back to suddenly back in the '60s again. So that was a real special event. But I've always loved when we've done those kind of things. We did the first Rock in Rio festival with James Taylor, and on the same night was George Benson and Queen.
You see, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, those kind of things. But it's really the backstage that's always amazing.
That's exactly right. No, I mean, just the. But you were able to just you were right in that pocket, but. I don't know. You said something. You said Taylor's comprehensive guitar style. What did you mean by that?
Well, when you see James, I mean, he's probably one of the most underrated guitarists around, because when he plays guitar, he's got this moving thumb that is always playing bass. He has a rhythmic quality to his playing, plus his chordal qualities. So he's pretty much like a one-man band when he plays guitar. I mean, everything is defined in his playing. So we as drummers and bassists and whoever was playing with him, you really had to figure out how do I bob and weave through all this to come up with a part that justifies being there, because he's already playing the part that you would normally be hired to do.
Right.
And so it's interesting when you end up working with guys like this. Like a lot of times I end up working with pianists who are solo pianists that are pretty much, they do piano bars and they just play piano and sing. And they're so used to overplaying constantly because they're the only thing playing that you really have to work hard with them in the studio to kind of tone them down. You don't have to play every note of every moment. You can kind of relax because you've hired a band to play with you. And it's sometimes that's real difficult because they're so... the whole nature of their music is defined by their style, and getting them to chill out a little bit and let other guys in can be very difficult for them.
It's so weird. You look at like these old, not even old, they're just any of these jazzers, even like guys like Horace Silver, those guys they could just play chords, just rhythm chords, just play in the pocket. And I feel that we talked about that hypnotic quality of just that's what makes it special, and staying in there. And it's almost a little bit too intimidating for people that are a little not as thick-skinned as the former Hollywood Bowl cat Lee Sklar. I mean, at the end of also life is another L, and life. And what I mean by life is sitting there painting your walls in your home, or just knowing that you are lucky enough that you are not in Gaza. Or that you are not.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think when did you in your life? I mean, I'm 36, Lee, and I'm kind of just about 4.5 years into this enlightenment period. But I'm just curious about when the light bulb went off for you, where it was like, yeah, I'm blessed.
I think
not because of the music at all. I mean,
I think I've felt this way my whole life.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I come from just a real average middle class upbringing, but my folks were really, really great. I have a great sister, and we all got along great. School's back because I'm going on 68, so I mean I'm like double practically where you're at. But when I was going through to public school in the 50s, man, there was nobody was going to private schools or a Montessori school or anything. The schools weren't like this big issue. We had great teachers. The environment for education was great. We could walk to school every day. Nobody was worried about being abducted, and the few gangs that were around, like motorcycle gangs and stuff, they fought with chains and brass knuckles. There was no drive-by shootings or people having to go through metal detectors. It was a really blessed time when we look back. I mean, there were problems when you sit there and you watch Father Knows Best and all these shows from the 50s, and then, the report comes out later, the expose that, well, Robert Young was actually drunk during most of the filming of that, and Billy Gray got popped for dealing marijuana, and Kitten ended up in prostitution. I mean, it's like, it isn't this illusion that's painted in the same way you look at magazine covers and people want to be like the girl on the cover, yet that girl doesn't even look like the girl on the cover because she's so heavily modified in Photoshop and all that stuff. But I think for me, I never really felt that it was a difficult world, even up through college when Vietnam was raging, and my philosophy teacher in college was my draft counselor, and I was fully ready to move to Canada at that point because I was vehemently against the Vietnam War, and there was no way I was going to go into the service. And I ended up fortunate that I ended up with a 4F for just physical nonsense, and it was all like a skin disorder.
Yeah, my dad did the same. My dad got a hernia. He's your age. He got out the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it was. There's been darkness through every period, but there's also been. I've been playing music since I was a little kid. It's really one of the things I've been one of the great constants in my life. Then that's where life comes into it. Is I feel very. I would say blessed from the standpoint that I really kind of found a direction very early on in my life, and I was able to pursue it. And other than a few odd jobs here and there, I've pretty much been able to support myself my entire life by doing the thing I enjoy doing the most. And for that, I pinch myself every day. And if it suddenly ended now, it ends. That's fine. It's been a good run. I haven't been stupid. I mean, at this point, I'm on Social Security and my pensions. So,
and you're working, and you're still working your ass
off. And I'm working. Yeah. But if I stop working, at least I know I'm somewhat solvent if I don't go crazy.
Do you think
change my lifestyle? So
no? Do you I don't want to compare going back 30 years or 40 years to the live club circuits of each urban center, but I don't consider the United States to have a lot of. Where do you think the best, or the most interesting music is happening in the world today?
I think it's more supported, certainly in Europe, than it is here. It's more eclectic. There's more places to play. I know a lot of people that work in Germany and France and stuff, and there's tons of little venues for people to actually go play music. Where back in the '60s in LA, there were tons of places to go play, and you could just go in and jam and sit in with guys. And most of those places are all gone now, and you pretty much have to pay to get into a place to play. And it's a different scene altogether in the States. But once again, like when I'm traveling, recording or touring, I'm in a little bubble. I kind of get to go do what I've been brought there to do, and there usually isn't enough time to explore the scene. But I'm sure. I mean, I saw there was a lot of places because I spent a great deal of time over the years in Japan. There was always all kinds of little nooks and crannies where people were doing stuff over there. And
did you well, it just flashed in my mind, and now I can't remember it. So no, it's hard to, when you get in your bubble, you get in your bubble. So it's the Ash Grove. Thank you. Did you see Scotty Stoneman at the Ash Grove, or did you?
No, but I would see people like Doc Watson.
Yeah.
I played there with Sandy Bull.
You did with Sandy Bull?
Yeah.
Did you wind up on any of those Vanguard albums with him?
Yeah, Sandy was amazing. He was one of the first guys that ever had like multiple tape recorders on stage and did all this stuff with them. I used to do stuff with Sean Phillips.
Yeah, I saw that. But no, the Sandy Bull stuff. Sandy Bull, he was playing with Billy Higgins. I mean, this guy was lights out, man.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was pretty. But the Ash Grove was great. But there used to be, I mean, the Sea Witch, the Golden Bear. I remember I was playing at the Golden Bear with Jimmy Reed, and these two guys came in and they asked if they could do a little like audition set, and they said, fine, go ahead. And I think we were there and Paul Butterfield's blues band was playing too.
Wow!
And these two guys got up and started doing this kind of Irish minstrel music. And it turned out it was Seals and Croft before they ever had a record deal.
Holy, what year was this?
There was our mouths hanging up listening to these guys sing and play. It was mind-blowing. They were so great.
What a great story. So that was like you were Jimmy Reed in like 60?
Yeah, it was probably 68, maybe around that 67, 68. That was when we had talked when I was doing the Chitlin stuff.
Well, that to me is that kind of, when you talk about development, they invested something in Bonnie Raitt. They wanted to see her come to fruition. They were willing to, because they knew it would pay off. I mean, you talk about development. I mean,
they had vision. They could see somebody as an artist that just, you don't just fall off the turnip truck in front of a studio and come out in full bloom. You have to learn your craft. And in those days, you had opportunities to develop your craft. You had deals that allowed you multiple albums to do over the course of your signing, and there were places to go play and work on songs before you went in the studio and do things like that, where now that just doesn't exist. And everybody talks about, everybody I know practically has a home studio. Anybody can make a record. Not everybody can make a great record. And that's the real difference. It's like people talk about instruments and they go, how hard is it to play bass? And I go, to play bass isn't hard. To play bass is very difficult. Mm-hmm. You can learn the rudiments and scales and stuff, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a player. The difference when you see guys that are really, really good, it's it's humbling. I was just up with Judith Owen, and we were up in Seattle, and I went and saw Victor Wooten and his band.
Right.
And I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. I've known Vic a long time, and I am so deeply humbled when I sit in an audience and watch what this guy can do. He's such amazing musician and such a beautiful human being, and he pulls it all together in such a unique way. To be really great at an instrument is a lifetime of working at it. To be adequate, anybody can kind of nail something down in 6 months of noodling around.
Final question in this, what's been a riveting hour and many more to come. Did you ever do any work with the engineer Jim Stern?
No, I didn't.
Do you know who he was, though?
No, I think I remember the name, but refresh me.
Stern was the he was a drummer in the Bay Area in the '60s, and he was the original drummer at Fantasy Studios when it was in Oakland with Ray Shanklin.
Yeah.
And then he moved over and really just, he kept playing, but it wasn't professionally playing. He became the lead engineer at Fantasy in the early 70s and through the 70s. And we've been doing some interviews, and he was telling me this story, and it was, they bought the Stax Volt collection. So
wow.
Fantasy did. So he was sent out to Nashville to check out the goods, and against these were all masters, stuff that had already been released, but just were sitting there, and so they bought it, and he took it back, and what they wanted to do with it was sort of dust it off a little bit, put a little more modern sound on it, enhance it a little bit, make it sound a little bit brighter. So they had he brought in these local guys to play the Steve Cropper line. Nobody could do the Al Jackson drum line. He had to do that one. But the point is that he even recalled this album. It was Albert King album called The Pinch, and so nobody got credit for it. There were no credits on the back because it was all silent studio musicians who just replicated the music, And yeah. What I was curious about is if you were ever one of those guys that were like, we need you to do this exact.
Oh yeah. I got called in. I had a friend that was producing a girl band, and I'm not going to say any names.
Sure.
He called me and he said, bass just isn't. He was getting ready to start mixing their album, and he said, bass just isn't happening. And he said, is there any way you can come in and replace all her parts so that nobody will know it's been replaced, but it'll just have a better tone and a better feel. And I ended up, it was a gig, so I ended up replacing all this stuff, and they mixed it. And the next thing I saw was there was a full-page ad on the back of Bass Player magazine for the girl that was the bass player in the band raving about this dude. And I thought, I've never even gotten a full page on the back of Bass Player. And we used to go through it all the time. A lot of times you'd go in the studio and you would cut tracks, and then they would invent a group to be that stuff, too.
Oh.
So you were just going in and cutting generic tracks, and then they would find out, if guys would be singing it or girls would be singing it, and they would put together some fictitious band to do it, to go out on the road or something like that. So we used to do a lot of that stuff, and a lot of sound alike, where you have to cop records and make them sound. They don't want to license them, so you end up recutting stuff, so the original artists weren't going to get, the exorbitant fee that the producers of the project didn't want to spend. And it runs the whole gamut.
Yeah, no, it kind of, it was one of those revelations, because I was like, what we know is cutting and pasting before. You actually had to play just the stories of the...
Oh, well, man, there's so many times I've watched, in the old days, I would watch MTV, and I would go, I see this band in there, I know that. Then I'd realize that it was us on it, but there's other guys on TV that are performing that are now the band that it is. But I would go, oh man, that's like me and Jim Gordon or whoever and whatever players on the thing. And we had actually cut all the tracks and then but there they are on MTV, with the slick video and all that stuff.
I don't know. I want to be able to sleep well tonight. I don't want any more of these stories.
It runs the gamut.
It really does, man. I'm gonna squeeze all these. We got to touch on Jim Gordon, and then you still need to get back to me about the concept of love. So you can dwell on that, and then we'll reconvene again, my man.
You got it.
All right. Have a beautiful night, Sklar. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good, man.
Take care.
Take good care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.